Welcome to Basic Binges on the Nom Talk Network, folks. As you can see, we've got a very, very exciting show for you today. Emphasis on the X. I'm your host, Mike Manalo. You guys might have seen me on Basic Binges before, just spreading my hot air about all of my terrible, terrible opinions and hot takes on things. But that being said, there is not a terrible opinion or hot take today from anyone, because we're talking about one of the best shows on TV right now, if not, in my opinion, the best show on TV, X-Men 97. I can't do this alone. I love this show so much, but, much like Cyclops on his own, there's no way. You need a team for all of this. So we have with us the greatest panelists ever assembled to talk about the topic of X-Men. So without further ado, to me, my X-Men. I'm going to kick it off to some of my favorites right now. Katie Tidwell, how are you? And do you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. Hello. I'm Katie. I am a cosplayer, nerd, wish granter, and I love X-Men, Avengers, all that fun stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you, Katie. It's great to have you on the show. And for anyone asking, this woman is a wonderful cosplayer who knows everything there is to know about X-Men, or quite a bit actually. Whatever you feel comfortable with me
Not
saying
everything.
and bragging, but a lot about X-Men. So I'm excited to have you. Next up, Miss Toni Sanchez. How are you, Toni?
Hi. Everybody can hear me? Yes. All right. I unmuted myself. I've been having a terrible time with the mute button, guys. Hi, Toni Sanchez. Nice to see y'all. I'm joined by the captain and lieutenant back there. And I'm super excited to be here and talk about X-Men.
Love it. Another expert for everyone out there. So thank you very much, Toni, for joining. I'm excited to get into this with you. You had your own podcast where you talked about X-Men as well.
Yeah, I was a co-host on Astonishing X Show. And myself and my co-host Brandon and Joe just geeked out about X-Men. Mind you, this was like we started it prior to the pandemic and tried to keep it going during. That was a little troublesome. So we only got through the first season of X-Men 92. And we've been desperately trying to get back together to talk about this, but some of us have kids now, some of us have like really important, like super busy day jobs. So it's proving a little challenging. So really, really hyped to be able to just talk about it with anybody really, but especially you guys.
Good to have you here. We're hyped to talk about it too. And we hope that someday that podcast makes a return, because as X-Men 97 has proven, when it comes to the X-Men, it's always about coming back, right? Like, how many times has Jean Grey died? Follow her example. Just keep bringing things back. And last but not least, my very dear friend and colleague from the Nerds of Color, Mr. Michael Lee. How are you, Michael?
Hello, I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me. I'm expecting an onslaught of very fun things, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. A very fun onslaught of things, and I'm very much psyched. So, yeah, guys, I think we got to get into it. Who's ready to get into it? You guys are ready to get into it?
So
Yes.
Let's do it. So, for
Yeah.
those watching, first things first, don't forget to redeem your Nom Talk points to make us do crazy things on camera. We are your puppets, just like Bastion controls Prime Sentinels. You could redeem your points, make us sing, make us dance. Actually, I don't think there's a dance one, so thank God for that. But make us drink. And speaking of which, we've got Eric in the chat who redeemed Hydrate. So the first thing that we're going to do is take a swig of this delicious Coke Zero, which has Iron Man on it, I think. There.
Water.
Yeah, hydrate, everyone.
I'm getting healthy here.
watered down
Yes, of course.
in my little ghosty cup, my rude ghosty. So
By the way, what is everyone
Yeah.
eating and drinking? Toni, are you? What's in the ghosty cup?
Okay.
This is watered down great green tea. So yeah,
Oh,
more importantly, the rude ghosty, because I just look how adamant he is. Such conviction. He cracks me up every single time I look at him.
Adamant because he's filled with adamantium? No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. Okay.
mm.
Well, not anymore because we ripped that out of him. Anyways, Mike, what are you eating or drinking? This is Basic Binges and Nom Talks. We have
Well,
food.
I'm drinking water from my
Yes.
Pixar Fest
Ooh.
thing that I got. And then I'm eating a Cuban sandwich. That's what I have
Oh, nice.
with some chips.
I
So
had a
I just
pancake
made it.
lechon for dinner. So it's very
Oh,
similar, you know. Yeah. It's
yeah.
very Cuban. Love it, love it. And Katie, are you eating or drinking anything?
I am, because I'm in Denver and the elevation is crazy. We're doing water with electrolytes with my John Wick
Ah,
sticker.
love it. Love it.
Cutie, and he even has the pencil. So cute of him. And then we're keeping it simple with some plant-based protein bars.
Delicious and nutritious.
Yes.
I really wish I could make beignets. I would give everyone beignets, but unfortunately, the
Oh,
person who makes beignets is no longer with us, so we're going to have to move forward from that.
mm,
Sorry,
You just
guys.
went straight in, just
I just went
mm.
straight
right.
for it. I just went straight for it. Sorry. I want to make people cry, just like that episode. Anyways, just diving into the season synopsis. If you guys haven't seen X-Men 97, all of season one, this is a conversation about all of season one. So there's going to be a lot of spoilers here. But we if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, we encourage you to, because it is, in my opinion, phenomenal. Basically, this takes off right after the original series, maybe about a year after the original series ends. Charles Xavier has been presumed dead. Little did we know that he was actually being carried off to the Shi'ar Empire. Actually, we did know that, but and the X-Men are without a leader. Scott Summers is kind of filling the void because he is the professor's first student and pretty much the leader of the X-Men. Before we find out that Charles actually left everything to Magneto, including the X-Men himself. So everything from there kind of escalates into a series of events that leads to a conspiracy that builds into the introduction of the the season's big bad, Bastion, who basically is a technopath, non-mutant technopath, but that it's basically a hybrid human sentinel birthed from the consciousness of Master Mold, Nimrod, and a few other, crazy, sentinel-esque technologies. And yeah, he ends up creating this plot to destroy Genosha, which was a huge event in this series. Create Prime Sentinels out of various humans, thousands and hundreds of mutant humans around the world, and tries to take over everything, really kind of destroying the potential hope that Magneto has in actually reforming, living out Charles's dream, and also really kind of just creating and wrecking chaos for the X-Men with other villains like Sinister and well, Mojo makes an appearance, although he's not really connected, but Bolivar Trask, all of that. As far as synopses go, I know that that was incredibly high level. Again, if you haven't seen the series, you really should watch it all, because all of this, I'm not doing any of it justice, but I really, really, really want to stop talking and give it up for my amazing panel to hear their overall thoughts on the first season of X-Men 97. Katie, I'd love to start with you. What are your thoughts on this season? Out of 10, what do you give it? And yeah, overall, just let us know what you think.
I give it a 12 out of 10. It's
Sorry.
amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. And it's interesting because my background in terms of X-Men really came from reading it sporadically throughout the books. I didn't see the original series until recently. So a lot of my knowledge as it pertains to the animated series is all coming together within the realm of X-Men 97. So it's been really interesting to see it as it's happening and being like, oh, seeing those connections. I loved it. I I want season 2 right now. I could
Yes.
go on and on and on.
We definitely must. We will for sure. Toni, what about you? Your experience with X-Men, your thoughts on X-Men 97, all of this. Yeah.
Uh, I don't want to be dramatic and say that X-Men, I taught myself how to read through X-Men comics, but I kind of taught myself how to
That's
read,
amazing.
like expand my vocabulary, because once you figured out, like, and the as, then they start encouraging you, pushing you towards the library. And thank goodness I just had I remember an uncle moving into a new house, and the previous occupants had left behind an entire shed of all kinds of knickknacks, and then there was like these like massive boxes of comic books. In there was like, and then of course like that kind of like helped spur my comic book, my introduction to comic books. And then of course X-Men 92 came out when I was about I would have been about 7, 8 years old. So I mean, it was just like the perfect cross section of like me receiving, I didn't know it at the time, but since X-Men 92 is so heavily inspired and frankly just straight adapted in some cases, those same exact comic book stories I was just receiving from several fronts, through comic books and also through the original X-Men 92 show, just an overall X-Men education. It's been like my number one primary like bedrock of like my nerddom, of my geekdom. So like I'm super obsessed with X-Men. So that's always been my love. So when I found out that this was going to be a thing, X-Men 97, overjoyed. And where I'm at now, I don't think I would give it like a perfect score, but I'm so overjoyed. I'm so excited to know that this is where we are headed with the integration of, finally getting X-Men back into the Marvel stable, because for all the reasons why, I don't have to like parse them out here. But there was such a limitation in the mythology and there was such a gap. And the X-Men mythology is so wide, it's so vast, there's so much potential there. There's so many different directions that you can go. And finally seeing, where we can actually take it, once you have like, a real commitment to it. It's just really super exciting. So yeah, I love it.
That and you're 100% right. There's a vast like mythology in all of these comic books, with storylines that are so complex. Props to X-Men 97 for really kind of bringing a lot of those to the limelight and kind of knocking them out. Even in like one episode they could do something like that, so that was impressive. But yeah, um Mike Lee, overall thoughts on the first season of X-Men 97?
You know, and basically everyone said what I wanted to say, but I am really excited to see how they're you know, normalizing a lot of things that were considered probably taboo back in the time when it was originally released. So, you have a lot of these, um, same-sex kind of relationships or hinting at it at least. And I'm really loving that. I'm really getting into that. And that allows us, to see that, even back then, this was more accepted. And it speaks to, it basically speaks to what the outsiders are, what the X-Men were, back in that time. They were outsiders. They were, kind of not necessarily misfits, but they were basically ostracized by a larger society of regular humans. So they're starting to incorporate a lot of the things that are normalized now and everything like that, but still making it impactful. So I'm really excited to see what they do with that, from here on out. I hope they don't exhaust too much of their plot, which was some of the things that I've read about, but we'll see what happens. But yeah.
Great thoughts. Question just kind of that I want to open up to everyone. We've all three of us, whether it's recently or in our childhoods, we've all seen the original series, right? And when you think about the context of X-Men 92 and then look at what they're doing with X-Men 97, I mean, how do we feel about this really kind of aging up? The subject matter, the content, and everything. Mike, I think you kind of touched on it with the idea and the integration of a character like Morph, a non-binary character like Morph, who actually does have
Mhm.
feelings for Wolverine as well. But then also glimpses of people that are minorities, in society, that aren't just minorities because they're mutants, but because they're LGBTQ plus or different races or anything like that, which is the
Mhm.
core of X-Men. I think they amplified that a lot in 97, which I love. But then I also think that X-Men 97 really went there and did things like complete genocide, really complex philosophical questions about society and how it views its minorities in a lot of a deeper way than 92 did. Plus, you can also get away with things like swearing and saying damn, hell, um, relationships and
Blood visuals
implications
and
about
everything. Yeah.
sex. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, with Cyclops, Madeline Pryor, all that. How do we feel about all of that? I kind of want to just open that question up to whoever wants to answer it and kind of chat about that and their feelings and thoughts on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I watching this as an adult, really for the first time and seeing it, and again, like in the context of this, I find it very interesting, and I'm going to compare it to Jar Jar Binks. I had this conversation recently. Jar Jar Binks with episode one, and who are the people who loved that character? It was us. It was our generation, and it wasn't the adults. So this Jar Jar Binks, as we're seeing it now, we love him and we're adults. We're seeing 90, the early X-Men. We have this, and now it's aged up to us. It's kind of grew up with us. So that's kind of a weird take on it. I like the Jar Jar Binks connection, but that's kind of how I see this. How they had a palatable way of dealing with these issues in the 90s, which is pretty progressive, but now it's for us, and now we're seeing them actually really actually talk about it, like using the verbiage, the actual context, the situations. And it's kind of like a millennial experience that we're seeing here with all the current events. We're seeing it in real time with other things. And it's unfortunate that it's very mature for us now, but I I really think they did a really good job of just making it really appropriate in all ways, but also still palatable and not too harsh. I don't know. I said a lot there. I don't know if that makes sense.
That coming from me, that's definitely not a lot. But no, it's great thoughts. Anyone else want to contribute to that or add on?
I
So when I
go for it,
okay,
Mike.
no, okay, okay. For the '92 version, I was surprised that they could get away with some storylines. I don't want to say necessarily get away, but like when I heard techno organic virus back in the day, I would not have understood that it was a mirror or at least trying to a metaphor for the AIDS virus at the time. And then when I watch it now, it's like that there it is, and I would never have understood it when I was a kid. So I was really um seeing it now, I guess compared to before, I'm glad they can, be able to just freely do the stories that they want to do without holding back or anything like that. So yeah.
Toni, you too?
Yeah, so I don't remember X-Men 92 being too family friendly at times. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember
Yep.
like my first thought immediately goes to that Nightcrawler Mystique episode where they show Mystique like straight up trying to murder an infant Nightcrawler because she's trying to hide the fact that they're mutants. She can shapeshift, but her blue little demon looking child, she can't. So she literally just chucks him over a cliff. And I mean, like, it's pretty heavy stuff, especially for a Saturday morning cartoon. But I mean, there are other moments too and other themes where, and I think that's where the X-Men have always been like so effective about articulating these massive, huge themes about like sacrifice and what it means to be a hero, especially when, yeah, I mean, we can argue about like the choice to be an X-Men, but they don't choose to be mutants. And so for some, it's something where they definitely just feel like this is a choice and they feel like, well, this is the best case scenario. And there's varying degrees of like, why they choose to do what they do. And then as a result, varying degrees of, heroism. And I just love that this show has always been able to like, expand on that. And I say this show because it really does feel like a continuation. It does feel like the natural progression of where these characters would have been. Um, I have certain issues with X-Men 97 just because of the fact that it is only 10 episodes. And not only it being too little, they also have to cram in a lot in a little amount of time. So I just feel like X-Men 92, because it had more room to breathe, because it was like, I think, a standard season of like 20 some episodes, it just had, I think, a little bit more breathing room. It had a little bit more time to kind of like expound, like literally just like have more character moments. And I don't want to say like this show doesn't do a great job of that, but I just really would have appreciated just a little bit more breathing room just because the expectation that I had from 92 was like, oh, I've got all this time to focus in on a specific story or even like several episodes for, this massive story arc. But yeah, I definitely love how it does feel very much like a singular show, but there are some other moments where I'm just kind of
Mhm.
like, oh, there is a little bit of, I can see where we've had to mature up in certain ways, and I love most of it, and there are other ways where I don't really love it.
I would love to hear that. One of my topics that we're going to get into is least favorite things about the series. And I I want you to hold on to all of this, Toni, because I want to hear all about it. I'm really intrigued, and I think that this is going to be fun. But everyone's points were just phenomenal. I think Katie, your point about like us being kids when we watched X-Men '97, and how they basically know that we are now adults, aging up the themes, aging up, kind of not infantilizing us, even though this is animated, and kind of bring this to our generation, because it's appropriate now, makes a lot of sense. I think, as well, Mike, you touched on, you and Toni both touched on this, which was the idea that in 1992, X-Men the animated series was getting away with a lot of things that, we wouldn't expect a cartoon like that for kids to get away with. I think whether it's a techno-organic virus or the legacy virus being a metaphor for AIDS, that's not something that you'd expect in a kids cartoon show, and it's a great point. And then Toni, you mentioned the same thing too, and that's 100% true. This has always been, a very mature cartoon series, and we're touching on things like bigotry with the Friends of Humanity saying and yelling things like "Go back to
Mhm.
where you came from." There's even an episode that I remember watching where Colossus and the X-Men have to stop Russia from invading a nearby country and taking it over as part of the USSR. When I watched that, I was like, "Holy crap! What the hell happened in 30 years? This is actually relevant now." God, it's scary, but it's also wonderful that, because we got older, they could make it a lot more mature for us. But Toni, to your point as well, I 100% agree with you. I wish, and this is just my bias because of how much I enjoyed it, there needed to be more than 10 episodes. I was not ready for this to end after 10 episodes, and
Correct.
a whole season would have been awesome. So I, agree with all of you guys across the board. Wonderful, top marks. Well done, X-Men. Yeah. Any final thoughts on just the overall thoughts on season before we move on to our next topic? Okay.
No.
Yeah, let's do
My,
it.
my next topic for everyone. Well, before I get into it, I have to ask. Admittedly, it is best episode, but before I get into best episode, I need to ask: is there anyone out there whose best episode for the series is not Remember It? All four of us, our favorite episode is Remember It. Okay, let's do this then. Let's talk about Remember It, but I also want to hear, in addition to Remember It, what your other next favorite episode is. My favorite episode is Remember It, of course. I think my next favorite episode, interestingly enough, even though I love To Me My X-Men and Mutant Liberation Begins, I think Bright Eyes is actually my second favorite episode, because Rogue is just amazing in that. They touched on so many things and it advances the plot line so well. But Remember It is just literally hands down one of the best, singular best episodes of television this year, and also probably the singular best episode of X-Men the Animated Series and X-Men '97 to me, because it's just so heart-wrenchingly well done, gorgeous. It is the Mutant Massacre incarnate on screen. And just that relationship that we've grown up with between Rogue and Gambit, there's just so much payoff there and so much heartbreak, and I loved it so much. But Toni, I want to start with you. Remember It being your favorite episode, I'm sure. Let us know your thoughts on that, and then also your other favorite episode outside of Remember It.
My other favorite episode was Mutant Liberation Begins. That's the second episode. And
Mhm.
when they decide to put Magneto on trial at the UN. Um, and Magneto just has like amazing moment after amazing moment. Um, I've always found Magneto to be just like such a fascinating, because I know he's technically a villain, but is he really? Um, he's kind of an anti-villain the way that we have anti-heroes, because like we
Mhm.
understand why that dude is saying and doing the things that he does. And there's a huge part of me, even though I'm just like, hey man, genocide isn't so cool, but also I get it. But maybe therapy, perhaps. Um, but I just really appreciate how there were just, immediately into, we had that 2 episode premiere for the public. And I know that even the screening events had like, I think the first 3 episodes. But the first episode really is just an introduction. And 2 is where it really ramps up, and it ramps up hard. and it's all about these moments about Magneto kind of expounding on the fact that he's trying to live up to the memory of his dear friend, Charles Xavier. And at the same time, he's really battling with his real instincts, especially after what happens with Storm, with her powers being taken away by, basically a vengeful, Friends of Humanity mob. And I just felt like, man, how could it possibly get better? And then it got better. And then we got to remember it. And I mean, like, I think that it was just so, we knew it was coming the minute we started talking about Genosha, or at least I did, reading as many comics and X-Men comics that I have, knowing that anytime you start gathering large amount of people on Genosha, it never really bodes well. And to know that they took it to that extreme and to that level, it was shocking, but it also felt correct, given the climate that had progressed, from X-Men 92 to X-Men 97. And then I read something about Bo DeMeo, where he was talking about how very much this show was geared towards the audience that had grown up, especially a generation that had grown up in times of 9/11, the COVID pandemic, so on and so forth, just all these different, world altering tragedies and events. And it all of it felt organic, all of it felt correct. It all felt like the right thing to do in terms of moving this kind of story along, especially around these particular topics. Like the pieces are set. Now there is a logical conclusion to where the pieces actually are. It was horrible and heartbreaking because Gambit is literally my favorite character in the show. Like I was like, there's no way, right? There's time travelers running around everywhere. There's no way that this is actually going to end up with like the best guy on the team actually like dying, right? I never saw a body. And then they showed us a body and I was like, this is horrible. It's awful. And then they showed us a funeral and it became even more awful. So I was still devastated. I still don't I'm excited for what season 2 is going to bring because I don't think it's the last that we've seen about Gambit. But yeah, that show was just like devastating in all the right ways.
Yeah, I guess you could say there was so much death, right? I mean, what could potentially happen with Gambit. Yeah. I will say this, Tony, I 100% agree that, it's so great that you chose both Mutant Liberation Begins and Remember It. Because when you think about the DNA, no pun intended, of those two episodes, they're almost inherently linked. In Mutant Liberation Begins, you have Magneto trying to walk the path of Charles, as he kind of says earlier or later in the season. And then in Remember It, you have every reason why Magneto is goddamn justified playing out on screen. And it really makes the X-Men start to question the teachings of Charles Xavier. Even before that incident, within that same episode, Cyclops goes nuts, on camera because he's frustrated and he's tired. So it's really interesting to see these two episodes almost being opposite sides of the coin. So wonderful picks, honestly. Mike Lee, I'd like to go to you next.
Okay.
Obviously, your favorite episodes, Remember It, because everyone's favorite episode.
Yes.
But second favorite episode, and talk about both.
I will have to say my second favorite episode is To Me, My X-Men, because there was just, for me, it represents that whole, kind of reunion sort of thing. Like just to be seeing these characters again after 20 plus years or so. And just the fact that, most of the same voices came back and all the action looks reminiscent of what I saw before, but just so much sharper, so much more colorful, and much of a larger canvas to work with because now the technology, we can see it more in a cinematic view of it. It just felt like opening the door to my friends again, basically. And I really wish they had done this with a Saturday morning like intention sort of thing rather than on Wednesdays, because that's how it felt honestly when I said this is like. And with the premiere, like Tony was saying, they gave us like these like over sugared like cereals and like hot pockets and everything. Is like this is what the show represented, and seeing all that action against Sentinels and reintroducing, not reintroducing, but introducing another X-Men to the roster. That was just so much. It's just so much fun to watch. Yeah.
I love that episode, Mike. And for my money, it has, and this is a season of television stacked with amazing action. But I think to me, my X-Men had probably some of the best action this season, if not my favorite action scenes. First off, as a big Cyclops fan, him sliding across the floor and just like becoming a badass within the first like couple of minutes. It's just like Bo DeMaio going like, "You guys hate Cyclops, you won't for long," you know. And then the landing scene and the scene against the Sentinels, to give them the forecast scene where Storm is just
Yes.
shredding Sentinels with glass made of the sands that she created from lightning in the desert. It's just,
And we couldn't achieve that back in '92. Honestly, even whether it's like on the TV or whatever, that there was no way you could have done that, like just visually back then. Now, oh my gosh, yeah.
amazing, amazing choices. Did you have anything that you wanted to add about remember it?
Toni said everything. I can't expound on anything.
All
She took
good.
it all away.
All good.
I cried. That's it. That's it. It was like you killed off the best X-Men. Yeah, the X-Men. Yeah. So
Gambit. Katie, how about yourself? Remember it, any words, and then your next favorite episode.
I mean, everything has really been said about Remember It. The thing is, like, being introduced to a lot of the X-Men on screen this time, I really fell in love with Gambit. Yeah, they took those unproblematic character away from us. There's so many people that would have been like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But you took the guy who literally just makes beignets and crop tops, and you did that. You did that, you know? So if you follow me on social media, you see I've been pretty busted up about it. I mean, I found in Denver literally a card on a Queen of Hearts on the ground yesterday. So take that how you will. You can imagine how I felt when I came across that. Anyway, my favorite episode was To Me, My X-Men, because it was just such a beautiful intro. It was amazing hearing the new and improved like intro with the song.
mhm.
Fabulous. I also love the fact that it changed every episode, but that's a different conversation. But I really, just we got all these beautiful introductions. So even if you hadn't met these people before, you got a nice intro without starting over. Love the beignets. I too want to be in the kitchen with Gambit in a crop top eating beignets. That sounds really nice. And perfect. But also the moment that you saw Gambit charge Logan's claws, that's a moment. And that's going to stick with me forever. I didn't know I needed that moment until I saw it. So that's everything in a nutshell.
That is such an awesome freaking moment, Katie. That is your
Uh-huh.
fastball special without a strong person to throw Logan. And I didn't even know you could charge Wolverine's claws like that, but that entire sequence.
Yes. It was.
I thought he was untouchable. I didn't think anything could penetrate him like that and certainly enhance him.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'll take it.
You're so used to Logan penetrating everybody else, but not anyone penetrating Logan. No,
Crazy.
I love that. No, it's such a great scene, and definitely such a great episode. And you hit the nail on the head there. You have 5 seasons of television and like how many years of comics? 50 years of comics, to introduce these characters, and in To Me, My X-Men, you get quick introductions for everyone, without really breaking the narrative, distracting from character development or growth. But you get everyone's deal, everyone's name, all of that within like 2 or 3 sentences of exchanges with everybody else. So it's a very well written episode of television. So love that, love that. The next question that I have for you guys is a two-parter. I think out of curiosity, well, my two-parter was going to be best character and best moment, but out of curiosity, in the same way that Remember It was everybody's favorite episode, is there anyone whose favorite character is not Gambit?
I was gonna pick my second favorite just to be.
Let's do this then. What is everybody's second favorite character and then best moment? Like the one scene that just made this season of television, and your second best MVP under Gambit. Mike Leo, I'll start with you if that's all right.
Oh wow. So this is going to be a controversial one.
Oh.
Your second favorite character, based on this whole series right now, is Jubilee. Honestly, I liked her. I liked her arc.
Controversial.
And I know you were saying you were throwing shade at her during the premiere. She was kind of whining and but dude, she had a wonderful arc. She matured, and we got to see her powers flow and everything like that. And she really took it to Bastion. Honestly, when I saw that, it's like you're really finally letting her, show her stuff. She's not, some background character. Um, she's no longer the guide, I guess, because in the '92 she was like our guide into this world. We saw, her experience through the mutant, all the mutant hatred and everything through her eyes. And now that she's thrust into the action, she's on the actual missions, but she's not flying the Blackbird yet. We have to wait until she actually flies the Blackbird. But other than that, I liked her character growth, and I liked her arc in this, and I like what Bo did with now that she's no longer some sort of background character or some sort of whiny teenager anymore.
I love everything you said, Mike. And you're right. I threw shade at her like crazy.
At the premiere, I was like, no.
She was so whiny. And when you watch the 92 series,
I understood it though. It's very valid. It is,
yes.
yeah.
But
it's very
you're
justified.
100% right, because they upped her so much in 97. She just F's up Bastion. His eye is looking like Glenn's after Negan, like
she melted his face. Come on.
It was so great. But more than that, she showed a level of maturity in this version of in this continuation of the show that she never did in the first series. So 100% agreed with you, and not a controversial opinion at all, at least after 97. Maybe in 92 it would have, but no, excellent. And did you have a favorite moment?
I would have to say it was a lot of what happened with I guess when Sunspot turned over, I guess, temporarily. And when I saw her, trying to appeal to his like better nature, like, don't do it, this is, Charles is right. He's kind of not necessarily right, but if the safer bet is to be on Charles' side, I kind of, that's where I saw her maturity, and that's one of my favorite non-action cinematic moments from her, at least. So yeah,
gorgeous moment, and it's also somewhat of a heartbreaking moment for Sunspot, for both of them. But Sunspot's like, my mom turned me in to the Prime Sentinels. That's really devastating. So you can't blame him. But also for Julie, right, love with this boy. I mean, like it's really a knife to the heart for her, seeing him defect after everything that they've been through. Especially, she's like, what about for me? And he just goes with Magneto.
You can stay with me, yeah. So
yeah,
I'm here. So yeah,
great, really underrated moment and lovely. I want to kick it to Katie, but before I do that, Jay Fancy Pants 13, great to see you on the chat. Thank you for jumping on. Really always lovely to have you, and don't forget to redeem your Nom Talk points to make us do crazy stuff. So yeah, Katie, oh wait, sorry, Nom Talk also redeemed Hydrate. So everybody swig. Thank you again, Coke Zero, for everything that you've done for the world. Katie, next, you're up next. Favorite character that's not Gambit, and best moment on the show.
Sure. First of all, love the keep hydrating thing. Keep doing that. I'm very high up, so I appreciate the reminder.
Yes.
I really loved Nightcrawler. In this. I think that you know, it's funny seeing him in the live action played by Alan Cummings. Like he did a good job, I think so. But like seeing him in this context and seeing him in in the context of, you know, the Gambit situation and everything else, you know, after that, I forgot how insightful Nightcrawler is, especially when it comes to his deep devotion to the Catholic faith and how he, in many ways, is so positive and optimistic when no one should be optimistic. And it really brought a lot of light to a lot of different situations. And with that said, of course, my favorite moment with Nightcrawler with the swords. Why fight with two when you can go with three? So that, yeah, that whole thing, that was great.
It was so good, wasn't it? Like, I just love that where he's like, "Oh, we've got 6 reasons for you," and Nightcrawler's like 9.
9.
And the double
9.
entendre because he's German, because he's like, "Nope," like I love that. That's so great. No, Katie, it's such a great choice. And I think Nightcrawler has two of my favorite lines in the entire duration of the season. There is no love without sin. It's such a beautifully written and wonderful line. And then also, where, and this is for the record, this is my favorite moment in the show that's not like an action sequence, when Rogue is just broken and by herself in Mexico, and Nightcrawler shows up and he tells her, you lost 2 men, but they you you gave them life, like they lived because of you. And she breaks down and he's there for her, but then she also looks up and the entire family is there for her too, comforting her during that moment. It broke my heart. For the record, Rogue, after Gambit, Rogue was my favorite this season. Her arc is just so complex. It's heartbreaking. We see her go dark. We understand why she goes dark, but just such a beautiful character and beautiful voice acting by Lenore Zan. Especially the "Sugar, I can't feel you" line. That's just daggers in all of our hearts, guys. But great choice, Katie, with Nightcrawler. Toni, what about you? Favorite character that's not Gambit, and best moment.
My favorite character who isn't Gambit is Forge.
Oh, nice.
So, so
Yeah.
I'm Indigenous. I'm Seminole from the Seminole tribe of Florida, and I actually had an opportunity through that podcast that I hosted a few years back to talk with Eric and Julia Leewald. They were the showrunners for X-Men '92, and we had them on as guests. And I remember having a moment and telling them, thank you for always being a source of like really the only real like mainstream representation that I was getting as a kid of like indigenous characters. And we can debate about like the quality of that representation, but for somebody who was just like completely starved of indigenous representation, X-Men comics and X-Men '92 was just like an oasis in the desert. And especially knowing that somebody like Forge, who is just always like the coolest fucking dude in the room, who was just like, "Oh, you got a problem? Yeah, I did a thing and I just put it together with some paper clips and some duct tape. Not a problem anymore." And it always drove me crazy in the comics that every time there was this massive, like company-wide, like, huge event where like Hank Pym, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange are all in the room because they're the smartest men in the world. Where the hell is Forge in that? Why is he not in the room? That always drove me crazy. I'm like, his entire power set is just like, I can build a thing. I don't know how I can. I'm just literally, I can see it in my head and I'm going to do it. Like, that's so, like, it's such an untapped power. And I think like so many writers kind of like see it as like this sort of like MacGuffin, when I'm like, he's so much more than that. And I think like this show does a really great job of like showcasing that. And especially like his relationship with Storm is like amazing. And the implications that he has, where sometimes like his inventions are not used for good all the time. Like, I just think he's such a fascinating character to begin with. And as far as like my favorite moment, this show is so great about making like so many moments pay off, whether you are someone who watched the original X-Men show, whether you've been reading comics for like years, decades. There were so many moments where it's just like these like subtle, unvoiced, like little winks. Like when they pull Emma Frost out of the debris. And when she was a diamond, I just literally, I freaked out and I literally, like, I scared everybody in my house because I started screaming, secondary mutation, secondary mutation. And I was so pumped for that because I was like, oh my God, it's all happening. Everything's going to happen. Or even in the same episode where Beast and what's her name? Trish? Is that her name?
Trish, yeah.
Yes. And
Trish Tilby.
start to see shades of Dark Beast. And I was like, oh, yes, do it, do it, do it, go evil, do it, do it. And he wouldn't because, he's, good old Hank McCoy. But it was, there's so many moments like that where like, or even it's the ending of the Tolerance is Extinction. I think it's part one where Xavier comes back and he's like, to me, my X-Men. And it's that perfect little like corner box animation with all just their faces surrounding each other in that little circle. And it's like, it's the corner box that they used to put at the top of the comics back, like, back in the 80s and 90s. And I just was always like, it's so great to have so many of those moments. And it just feels really good as a fan because you're just like, there's a bunch of nerds that are working on this show and they're nerds like me and they're talking to me without having to say a word. And it's so great. It's so amazing. And it just always felt so good knowing that it's not just one per show. It's like literally one per scene. And it's such a great relief because there's nothing worse than watching a show or a movie that you've been waiting on and you can tell like, oh my God, these people have not, they read the Wikipedia article and that's it.
100%. Singer. Anyways, like, no, I agree with you, Tony. So wonderful. Like, you're right. That scene where he's like, to me, my X-Men, you've got the heads. That's a panel. That's a panel come to life for all of us. And I love that. And Forge is such a wonderful character. I don't think we've seen the most badass that he's going to be just yet, because the way that this show ends with him and Bishop just going like, we gotta go rescue the X-Men. That's he's going to do some awesome stuff. The best is yet to come with him, but he just had some wonderful moments in this episode. Plus, also, I love the fact that you identified with Forge. That is the point of X-Men, for all of us to find characters that we can identify with, because at one point or another we felt like outcasts in our life, and for us to have that oasis, as you put it, in a desert of a lack of representation, and to see a character like Forge even in the old series and now, it's a wonderful feeling. It's the whole point of X-Men, so I'm so glad that you brought that up. Anything else before we move on to our next topic? All right. This one is the one that we've been waiting for, folks. The least favorite thing about this series. Tony, I see a devious look in your face. Before I get to you, because you are definitely going to be the first person I'm going to throw it to, I will say that I didn't give my rating. This is a 10 out of 10 for me, obviously, or as I like to put it, an X out of X, because it's Roman numerals and X's, and you guys get it. But I do think that the show has some flaws, and for me, I think the episode order was a little bit jarring, because you'd have an episode like Remember It, and you'd immediately want to see the events progressing following that shocking ending, but instead we have to take a break and go to what is it, life part,
Life Death.
Life Death Part 2. Which is a great episode, especially for Storm, who gets her old outfit back and says, I am lightning, and all that stuff, which is awesome. But it really detracts from the momentum that's being built up from the end of episode 5. And as much as I did love Jubilee's arc in here, I thought Motendo was just such a superfluous episode.
It was the filler, basically.
It was the filler. But those are the two least favorite things about the show for me. Other than that, it's an X out of X. But Tony, let's hear it.
So I didn't know that I was this kind of fan, but apparently I hate when things are different. And I really do not like the intro theme for X-Men 97. I have a visceral reaction every time I hear it. And that's because X-Men 92, that intro is just perfect. It is just like no notes, don't touch it. And then they touched it. Why would you do that? There's no point to you doing that. And I think the other thing that I have to like a lesser degree is like there's some really weird sound mixing issues that are happening in certain moments. I don't know if that's just like a translation thing that's happening between because like there's so much care that obviously is going into these episodes. So I don't ever want to accuse anybody on the show being like negligent, but it just feels like there's somewhere in there in the gap between like when the show is created, when it's handed over, when it's actually uploaded to the platform, like something is happening very weirdly in some of these sequences. There's that sequence with Wolverine and Nightcrawler where they're, Nightcrawler's got all three of the swords and like we all like go nuts. But if you listen to that scene again, it's just a really weird where like the sound effects just kind of like drop out to like a really like weird level, which is crazy because the previous scene is that huge massive scene with like the flying sentinel cyborg sentinels, and like it feels big and huge and loud, and then it goes into this other sequence which should be just as impactful, and it's just like there's something really weird going on in the sound mixing. And the reason why I bring it up is because one of the reasons I don't like the intro theme is because the sound effects that were in X-Men 92 theme, like they were so much a part of that theme and so much part of that song that it just was like you knew it was
I know
coming,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
and it was like that's exactly what it needed to be. And then with this one, at a certain point, I felt like this obviously is like my TV doing something wrong. Like it can't be the show. So then I would
Mhm.
jack up the volume, but I'm like, I would try it on my phone. I would try it on every TV I own, every screen, and it was happening on every single one. And I just don't understand
Mhm.
why the sound effects just feel so, at times, feel hollow and soft and almost tinny. And I'm not a sound engineer. I'm not somebody, but if I notice that, it just kind of feels like "Ugh, there's something weird going on and I can't explain it. I don't have the vocabulary or the expertise to like really articulate it, but it's enough for me to notice it. So that is literally my least favorite part, and it happens every single episode. So it's really hard for me to ignore. The
Poor
other
Tony. It's literally every episode, and you can't
right,
skip it because it's the intro, and that's a sin, but it's nails on
exactly.
a chalkboard for you.
It just I can't. So, and the other thing we've touched on it, I think a couple of times. I just really don't like how there's not a whole lot of time to breathe in between these big massive moments. I mean, like the end of the penultimate episode where he gets the adamantium ripped out of his body. That was a big massive moment in the comic. So it should have been a big massive moment in the show. And it was, but then it immediately just cuts to black and roll credits. And there wasn't any real time to really like absorb what had just happened. And I feel like if we had had like another episode or two within the run, there would have been adequate time to really just like be confronted with like how horrifying that really is. That moment really truly is. It opens up a whole new area of X-Men's mythology, which is really great. But I think in terms of like how impactful the moment is, sometimes how quickly we have to get through these moments kind of undercuts uh, how significant they truly are. So yeah, I would say like those are my two least favorite.
Both incredibly valid. And I didn't even put two and two together with the sound until you kind of brought it up. But yeah, you'd hear the snicked in of Wolverine's claws in the 92 episode where he's
Yes,
like
I wanted to
coming
bring
up and
that up.
smacking you. And then he doesn't in this one. I'm like,
Yeah.
but I'm so mesmerized by like stuff like, oh, they tried to replicate it, but that I missed that. And now that you mention it, I'm like, boo. So
Yeah. Boo. Boo that.
boo. Put the
Let's
sound
bully
effects.
them until they fix it. It worked for
um,
Sonic, guys. It can work
let's
for
let's do that, and then let's also rally for them to add more episodes to every season because I want more. Come on, 10 is not enough. But great points. Katie, what about you? Least favorite parts of the show?
I agree with the Motendo
Hmm.
episode. I get why it was there, especially with
Mhm.
Allison Court being the older Jubilee. It's like, okay, we needed just a full nostalgia episode, and I feel like that's what it did. But kind of going off of what everyone's saying about how, relatively speaking, these are very short seasons. I don't know if we needed that much Motendo.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that would have been a nice like 10 to 12 minute situation, and then we keep going. Yeah. I mean, still a fun episode, but yeah, I can't go much further into it. That's the long and the short of it.
It
No,
felt like a
it's
bonus feature on a DVD, really. It felt
yeah,
like,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
like a short film before a movie, you know?
right. Or
Hmm.
even
Yeah.
drop onto, the Instagram or the TikTok or something. It didn't feel like a whole episode to distract us from, yeah, Katie's totally 100% on it.
I agree. And it's kind of funny because to connect, Katie, your point with Tony's point, in a 22 episode season, you could afford a one-off like Motendo,
Sure.
and they did that a bunch in the original series. But you had 10 episodes here, and you're burning half of an episode, an important episode, because it was Life Death Part 1 as well, on
Yeah.
on an 8-bit episode, which wasn't really like anything. It was like, okay, but yeah, 100% agreed on all counts. Um, Mike, what about you? Least favorite moment
Least favorite moment.
or part of the show, whatever, anything.
Well,
Yeah.
part of the show, kind of what Tony was saying about the sound mixing. It was some of it was actually noticeable, yeah, throughout the whole intro episodes, and I was just having trouble. I was like, is my hearing going bad or something, or is it my TV? Because I don't like this. Um, and as she was saying, I was putting the volume max. I have what is that? Mini home pods. No, those things go loud, and those were on max. My iPhone, it was maxed out, and no, it because when you compare it, so when I listened to the original intro, you can actually, as you were saying, Mike, you can hear Wolverine, unleash his claws, unsheath his claws, and you can hear the whole smack, basically. Here, it was just so soft. Morphs, someone was shooting at Morph. That was no, you couldn't even hear it. It's like, what's going on? So I hope that's an issue that's resolved. I'm sure someone else brought it up too, like in their reviews. But yeah, the sound mixing was off. Again, with your Motendo, that could have been on the extras of the whole thing, not just an episode itself. Just if you want to watch extras, like where you see all the trailers, that could have been right there. You could have placed it there. Other than that, um, it was a great season so far. I really have no complaints. Probably like, but as actually, could have been paced better. I would have liked to see. This is kind of like a darker side of me. I would have liked to see Wolverine go through more excruciating pain as it was
Mm,
being drawn out because it was so, on the scaling issue, it was so far below the frame. And when you see it in the comics, it's just like right in your face.
yeah.
There, it's just like I could barely see it, and so, but it is what it is. So
Yeah. I wonder if they did that for like, oh, they didn't want it to be like too intense or something like that, which I think would have been a bad idea because, as Tony mentioned, that's a big, big event. Fatal
it's
Attraction
a big
is
event.
a
That's a thing. And
marquee
when,
event. Yeah.
yeah, and I think there was some with the comics when I saw the frames and everything, he go it's like really pulled out, and here, you know, you wouldn't have noticed if you don't pause it and take a really good look at the frame. So
I
whatever.
agree 100%. I maybe they'll make a bigger deal out of it when the show continues because it leaves on a very big question mark for Logan. He's not even conscious when the episode ends. So and to your point, Michael, we might be witnessing, the onslaught coming soon, So
We'll
I,
see. We'll
I have a
see.
feeling we're not done with that yet. And I do hope that they go back to it. I really did wish that they made it more excruciating, because that's how what we
Yeah,
felt when
see.
we were reading that. But yeah.
And they just
Guys,
paused it too, right?
yeah,
They don't
they just
it's not even flowing
made
out.
it
They just like,
animated. Yeah.
yeah, it's not
Splash.
even animated.
It did feel a little underwhelming. But I'm glad that they did it, but I
Yeah.
did it would have been cooler
It
to
was
have
about
made it
time they
and
did
more
it
brutal.
for
Yeah.
sure. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on. The logistics of a guy that can control metal against a guy with metal bones. This had to have happened at some point, like in the past.
Eventually, yeah.
Guys, I wish we could do this forever. I know I could definitely talk about this with you guys forever because I just love you guys and I love this show. But sadly, we are out of time. We're gonna have to wrap it up. Before we do, I want to kick it to everyone to kind of just, give final thoughts as well as a question for you guys, which is Team Magneto and Team Charles, and then tell everybody where they can find you. Katie, I'm going to start with you. One, where can everybody find you, Team Magneto and Team Charles? And if you have any final thoughts, please feel free.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at KTDWELL. So it's like K Tidwell, but with no I. Follow my Gambit grieving process on my story. I don't know what I am. There are moments like my opinion changed like the weather throughout this season. And like even watching the movies. So do I have to give an answer? Because I don't know. There's some episodes I'm like, I'm Team Magneto, especially when he was in his skivvies going over the earth and just powering everyone down. But I think I'm more Charles, but there are some days when I'm more Magneto. I don't know. But then final thoughts, just I can't wait for what's coming next. I'm excited. I'm really so.
Me too. Katie, thank you so much. Mike
you.
Lee, where can everyone find you? Team Magneto, Team Charles, and final thoughts.
Okay, so you can find me at I am Michael J. Lee on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and TikTok. Team Magneto I'm with Katie. Honestly, it's hard because both have very valid reasons. I could completely understand what Magneto went through and see why he came out that way. And with Charles, he's more sympathetic. I'm kind of that way as well. So there are very valid reasons. I'm kind of like, I don't know who to go to because you have to have something else because now you have to have like, cookies or something to bring me to the other side. It's not working. I agree, but there's got to be extra incentive for me to come over there. Final thoughts. So I loved it. Other than the little qualms I had with the sound mixing and the pacing, everything else was great. So yeah.
Well, they might not have cookies, but they might have beignets. So they're
beignets. Well,
there's that. Thanks, Mike. That was awesome. And Toni, same 3 questions for you. Where can everyone find you? Team Magneto, Team Charles, and final thoughts.
Yeah, everybody can find me on all the social medias at the Toni Sanchez, Toni with an I, Sanchez with a Z. Team Charles, I'm Team Emma Frost. I find her far more reasonable than either one of these two. They're at such extremes that it's just like there's a healthy medium there, and that medium is Emma Frost. So Katie, definitely recommend the comics where she's running the school as opposed to one of these two. Final thought: there's so many things that we didn't get to. Oh, one, the last episode where they're showcasing like all the different cities and spots in the world that are kind of like dealing with this crisis too, not just the X-Men. Cloak and Dagger show up in New York in the 90s, and I thought that was such a great moment because when I started wondering, like, well, where's this person? Where's that person? I'm just like, it's X-Men 97. They're showing me who exactly is where at that moment in time and in the comics. What an awesome, terribly nerdy moment. So that way they could pinpoint these two characters in that moment. Wow, loved it. What was the other thing I loved? Loved Omega Red. Holy crap. Can't wait for that guy to take on capitalism. Really excited for that. And then I was also just so, oh God, what was the last thing? It was in my head. It left. Anyways, must not have been that important. But yeah, super excited. Oh, that's what it was. All the Marvel characters are finally under one stable. So now we don't have to tiptoe through these cameos that X-Men 92 does. So that way people can actually speak. Dr. Doom is part of the conspiracy. And Captain America
Zemo.
Baron Zemo, yeah.
Stupid ass Invincible.
Spider-Man.
Is there.
Not just Spider-Man too. I mean, what is that? The actual Spider-Man from the animated series. Same shirt, same everything. Yeah.
100%.
Because they did cross over, right? So it has to.
They did cross over. So this is a confirmation that that was real, not some sort of gimmick. So yeah.
All these things are happening and they can happen and they don't just have to be like this weird silent cameo that they just have to like pass the censors. It's like
Right.
it feels
They can
good.
actually.
And I
do
like-
Onslaught Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like how they stuck to the generations, like because Iron Man was in that suit.
Yes.
No, it wasn't sort of modernized. It was, yeah.
Not a good suit.
Man, now
Not
I'm
a good suit, but they did it, and I loved it that they did it.
Bless them. But they stuck to it. They had
Yeah.
everything to make him look cooler, and they didn't. And that's because they're committed to the time frame. I love it. That's good times.
It's awful, but we're gonna represent that, awfulness anyway.
Oh man, now I regret not having a complete section just for the cameos because that is something that we can talk about all day. I'm sorry, guys,
Daredevil.
I failed.
Come on.
I failed there. Demerits. But yeah, thank you for bringing all that up, Tony, because that's genius, and I should have brought that up. But yeah. And guys, I've been Mike Manalo, TidyBullBoy182 on all my socials, but you can find mine and Mike Lee's work on the nerdsofcolor.org. That's at LA, and I'm also on whattowatch.com. I know it's a really, really hard choice. Team Magneto, Team Charles. It's Team Magneto for me. I'm sorry. And my final thought is superhumans. Good night, guys.
Come on.